got the power. You got my people in the east, yo, you gotta wake up. Midwest, dirty south, yo, you gotta stand up. All my homies in the west, yo, you gotta wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up.
Wake up, everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There's so much hatred, war and poverty. Wake up, all teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. 'Cause they're the ones who's coming up. The world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the best do. Bring peace, do we mean it? Can you feel it when we scream it out loud? Do you believe that we need it? Do you believe that it could get right? Do you believe that the children of the world deserve a good life? Well, if you do, it's time to wake up your mind. We can make it better, and I know it might take some time, but we gotta start somewhere. How about with you and me? From us it goes to others, then we'll have our unity.
Wake up, all the doctors make the old people well. They're the ones who suffer and who catch all the hell. But they don't have so very long before the judgment day. So won't you make them happy before they pass away?
Wake up, all the builders, time to build a new land. I know we can do it, long as we lend a hand. The only thing we have to do is put it in our minds, and surely things will work out, 'cause they do it.
I ain't here to take up y'all time. I came to shake up y'all mind. It's everybody's wake up call time. I can't sleep too long. Why they do the people wrong? Let's clean the world up before they sweep you gone. This is real talk. You can peek through songs. So when you feel weak, these words will keep you strong and help make a change for the better. It's hard for one to do it, but we can make some changes together. Stand up here and give thanks to the man upstairs. Put the egos and the pride to the side regardless, and just be role models, parents, artists. We can make it change or we can make it the hardest. If you gon' make a baby, you should make them the smartest. Let them know good and bad, right from wrong, how to roll with the punches when life moves on. And the stress won't take toll if you don't sweat it. World won't get no better if we don't let it. Let the negative energy ride. Keep hope alive. It's about time that we open our eyes. Wake up.
Everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There's so much hatred, war and poverty. Wake up, 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 wake up.
Yeah, well y'all best to vote. I don't care about the guns you tote. Listen to me like you listen to Fahrenheit 9/11. Ain't no time for the second guessing. The words I speak, the ones who sleep in the leadership, fix your mouth to teach. MCs teach the kids with speech. They don't have to worry about the police. We make them rich so they don't have to see. Every artist here on this track. We'll make a change here for young cats. This is for everybody, white or black. You better go and vote and get up off your back. This time for roll on, lift your head, get your voice up. You see the power of the people, it's a choice to ignite love. Now the choice is the gift that our people have to fight for. And the fight won't be personal for anyone to ignore.
all right. How you doing, brothers and sisters? I thank you for taking the time to spend some time with me and Coach T. That was the updated version of Howard Melvin and the Blue Notes featuring Teddy Pendergrass's song "Wake Up Everybody" back in the early 70s. Mary J. Blige and a couple other recent artists, that was their re-edition of that powerful, powerful song. The message is still powerful to this day. And so, talking about powerful messages, I got some powerful messages to share with you this afternoon. So I don't want to spend too much time talking, because in order to do so, I have to play 3 videos. And the first 2 are pretty short. The second one is almost an hour. So I want to go ahead and play the videos so that we can spend some time talking about the videos that were played. The first video that I'm going to play pertains to cognitive dissonance. The second one relates to the Stockholm Syndrome. And the third one, which is about almost an hour long, it deals with dissociative identity disorder. In all 3 of those conditions, we as so-called black folks, African Americans, we all suffer from all 3. This is the reason why we're in the condition that we're in today. And this is the reason why many of us are not aware of those psychological conditions that we have developed due to the long-term condition of our experience of being enslaved. Unfortunately, we still have that slave consciousness that our ancestors had and passed it on to us. And so now we're experiencing this slave consciousness, and many of us are not aware of that being the case. And many of us haven't diagnosed what is causing us as a people to behave in the manner that we're behaving in. And so I'm taking the time this afternoon to break it down to us so that you can do further research on those 3 mental disorders that we suffer from. Because in order for us to be able to move forward, individuals and as a collective, as individuals, we each have to bring remedy to these conditions that we're going to talk about this afternoon. And then as a collective, we must deal with it. So there's two areas or conditions that we must deal with. One as individuals and another as a collective. And so I'm only conveying to you what I had to do myself when I ran across this information. I had to deal with it as an individual, and then I had to deal with it as part of a collective. And so now I am healing myself from these conditions that were caused by us as individuals and as a collective of being colonized, and for the most part, still colonized as a people. Out of all that we have done, we still haven't been able to decolonize ourselves from our colonizers. As a matter of fact, they've been able to create a state that gives you the illusion of decolonization. But upon further scrutiny and new evidence, it shows clearly the manipulation that they have been able to do on us as a people. And so now, me and others who have been able to become free from that slave consciousness, we're sharing this information to those who are clearly still in that slave consciousness. And so let me go ahead and give out the disclaimer so I can get started. Me and Coach T are not professional financiers. Oh, let me correct something first, so that this disclaimer will make sense to those who may be new to knowledge is the new power. Me and my co-host, Coach T, we normally do a 2-part series on this podcast. The first part we dedicate to financial information. The second half, or the second part, we dedicated to political information. And so both financial and political information is very important for us as a people to move forward. And so in the disclaimer, I say that we're not financial planners, tax preparers, or anything to do with financial, because that covers the first half of the podcast. And then I say that we're not statesmen, politicians or so forth. That covers the second half of the disclaimer. And then I must also say a third, that all the videos and all the music that you may hear, we have no rights to any. We just play them as a means to help make our point, bring our point across to you. Because as we know, video and music are very powerful mediums used to bring our message across to our podcast audience. And so with that said, I'd like to get started on those videos that's going to explain cognitive dissonance Stockholm Syndrome and dissociative identity disorder. So let's get started.
Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about cognitive dissonance. What is it and how do we better cope with it? If you're new to my channel, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on that bell notification so that when I upload a video, you hear about it. But let's jump into what cognitive dissonance is. The definition of cognitive dissonance is really that people naturally try to find harmony between their beliefs and behaviors. That means that, like, if I believe that I'm healthy and I'm happy, then my behaviors also reflect that, meaning that I feel good in most days and I do things that keep my body and mind healthy. If our beliefs and behaviors are not in harmony, we can feel really tense and horribly uncomfortable, and that feeling is cognitive dissonance. Now, a somewhat easy way to describe or explain cognitive dissonance is smoking. Everyone knows that smoking is harmful to your body. We know it's bad for our lungs, it can cause cancer, we have all this information. However, many people still continue to smoke. And you could say that that would be cognitive dissonance, because our beliefs, what we know about smoking, is one thing, but our behavior and what we're doing is another. And so hopefully that kind of helps you better understand. The truth about cognitive dissonance is it can get more and more intense if it's related to our beliefs about self, or if there's a lot of value that we place on that belief. So if the behavior is going against either one of those, our cognitive dissonance and that uncomfortable sensation can get really intense. And when this happens, when we feel this horrible discomfort, we can be extremely irritable. We can lash out at people and start fights. We can yell at those we love. And what this really does is it causes the dissonance to get worse and worse, because then we know we're a good person, but here we are lashing out and it feels bad and we already feel bad and now we feel worse, and it kind of snowballs this cognitive dissonance into an even more uncomfortable situation. There are many things that can cause cognitive dissonance. However, I'm going to talk about two of the most common. And the first is abuse. Because if we believe that our parents always do the best they can, and parents, are supposed to love their children, that's what parents do, and we really believe that, which I honestly think that children always are born thinking that they are lovable and that their parents do love them. But then if we're shown through abuse that they don't, and they're hurting us, or they're telling us nasty things, screaming at us all the time, then that goes against the behaviors. What we're seeing in our world do not make sense with our beliefs. They aren't the same. Then we experience cognitive dissonance. We feel extremely uncomfortable. We can be really irritable and lash out because outside is not reflective of what we know and believe inside. Although every type of abuse can cause cognitive dissonance, I find this to be most common with my patients who have been through emotional abuse, because, like I talked about earlier, cognitive dissonance can get worse when it's about our belief, it goes against our belief about self. And so if we believe that we are innately good, we are kind, I am worthy of love, which I believe every child is born feeling that way, but if a parent then goes to tell us no, and you're terrible, and you're stupid, and they're just screaming obscenities and terrible things at us, that's going to go against our belief of self. And that is when cognitive dissonance feels its worst and most intense uncomfortability, and just feels bad. The second cause of cognitive dissonance, like I said, there are many, but these are just some of the most common ones, are toxic relationships. For the same reason I just talked about emotional abuse, toxic relationships can lead to gaslighting, which is when someone tells us that what we think and feel and believe isn't really true. And it can start to make us feel like we're crazy, or that we don't even know ourselves, and we can't trust our own thought process or our own memory. And all of that can make us feel extremely uncomfortable, because what we know and believe to be true, we're constantly told is not. And that doesn't feel good. Okay, so now we know what it is and what can cause it. But how do we make ourselves feel better? How do we cope with cognitive dissonance and reduce it? And the first way we can do that, ending abusive or toxic relationships. I know that not all of us are able to move out of our family home if our parents are the ones that are doing the abuse, but we can speak up and we can get more support. Be the squeaky wheel. Get out. Cut people out of your life if they're terrible to you. If they're saying nasty things to you, making you feel worse about yourself, that's not a good relationship for you to be in. I know it's hard. I know that we can mourn the loss of those friendships and relationships, and that's completely fine. Give yourself that time, but also give yourself the space from these terrible people. Start out with like 2 or 3 weeks. Trust me, you will notice your mood improving immediately. The second way that we can better cope with cognitive dissonance, especially if we're not able to get away from the toxic or abusive people in our lives, let's say they're our parents and we aren't able to move out quite yet, is we can focus instead on the positive things, the positive thoughts and things that are in line with our beliefs about ourselves and about our situation. Make sure that you're not allowing any room in your brain for any of those negative, nasty, abusive things. If someone's saying something nasty to you, know that you don't have to believe it. It doesn't have to be accepted. You can say, that's bullshit. All you do is tell me lies. There is no reason for me to listen to you because you've done nothing but talk horribly to me. And you're not a nice person. And you don't have any real friends. You could totally spin that out, push that away, and instead focus in on the thoughts, the wonderful, lovely, positive things that are in line with your true beliefs about self and environment. The third way that we can better cope with cognitive dissonance is to work with a therapist. Having someone in our corner, a safe place to talk about the trauma and abuse that we may have sustained, can be so beneficial. It can help us process through all that negativity. It can also offer another perspective. A therapist is going to give you a clear perspective that's not muddied by any of the abuse and trauma and things that have happened to you. They're going to offer up a nice, positive, more loving perception of you and your life, and that can make us feel so much better. And the fourth and final way to better cope with cognitive dissonance is working to build up our self-confidence. That can be through positive self-talk. That can be through surrounding ourselves with positive people who are in line with our beliefs about self and environment, who show us that love does exist and people are caring. The more we spend time around those people, the more we feed ourselves positive, confident, loving thoughts and beliefs about ourselves, the better we'll start to feel, and the less we'll feel that uncomfortable dissonance, because we'll know that those things that we're hearing, the things that are being said, aren't true at all. And we'll be able to kind of push them out and focus instead on the things that help us feel better. I hope you found this video helpful. If I left anything out or forgot a certain symptom or the way that cognitive
she went over quite a bit, but I want to just pinpoint some of the concepts that she pointed out. She said that cognitive is a result of an abusive relationship. Well, I want to view it not as individuals, as she is applying it to, the individual relationships that you might have with an individual. But I want to apply it on the grounds of our political relationship, or our relationship that we have with the United States of America. And I'm specifically talking about us as melanated people, us that are commonly been identified as Negroes, blacks, colors, and now African Americans, and how our relationships between us in the United States have been, and for the most part, it's been a very toxic relationship. It's been a very abusive relationship, especially when you compare our relationship with the relationship with other groups of people. No other groups of people have been abused the way that we have been abused by the United States of America. And so I'm applying those terms not as individuals, although they can apply to individual relationships, but I'm applying it to a collective relationship between us as a collective versus the United States of America. that's where we as a collective are experiencing cognitive dissonance. And you know we're experiencing it because I have the task of pointing this out. So I am bringing up the aspects of the relationships that we have between the two. And it may, or ain't no may about it, it will conflict with the relationship that you have in your head between yourself and the United States of America, especially if you believe what they propagate. But you must be truthful with yourself and know that we have always had a toxic relationship based on what they have done to our ancestors and based on what they are doing to us now. I know I ain't got to point it out. You know all the cases of police brutality, you know, the hangings that they have done to us, not just in the past, but there are still hangings going on today, murdering of our people going on today. It's a very abusive, toxic relationship. And this is what I'm talking about. And a lot of people, unfortunately, feel very uncomfortable when I point these things out. And what I am explaining is the uncomfortableness that you're experiencing when I talk about the relationship between us and the United States of America. That uncomfortableness is called cognitive dissonance. Some people feel so uncomfortable that they're not even willing to come on the podcast because they know I'm going to be talking about what I'm talking about. And it makes them feel so uncomfortable. And so they don't want to deal with that uncomfortableness. And so they rather be in denial than to deal with it so that we can rid ourselves of it, like I have done. You must understand that what some of you are going through right now, I have went through that because I had to deal with it to be able to move forward. You see? I had to understand that, you know, yes, America says this is the greatest country in the world. But I had to look at the reality of what it really is as opposed to what they say it is. Like they say, make America great again. Well, in my eyes, in my position, America was never great because they always abused us. So how can America be great by how they abuse my people? And so, you know, but some of us think that America is the greatest nation in the world. You know, they bought the program. And some of us may be very successful, you know. But even being very successful, expense of what? You know, just because you're able to become successful at whatever business or whatever activity that you're able to do, America doesn't mean that America is innocent of the things that they have done in the past and the things that they continue to do present. And so we have to be honest ourselves and really know that America has its abusiveness to us long term, and because of that, we as a people have developed that psychological condition called cognitive dissonance. And I want you guys to really do your homework on this so that you can really understand what it is, so that you can recognize it in yourself, so that you can get the help that you're going to need. Because in order for us to move forward as a collective, you as individuals going to have to recognize that condition that's here, so that you can rid yourself of that condition. Because you'll be able to listen to me without feeling uncomfortable, because you have dealt with the reality what's causing you to become uncomfortable in the first place. That's all I'm saying, sisters. That's all I'm saying. Because I've been tasked with doing what needs done in order for us to deal with this slave consciousness that most of us have. And in that slave consciousness, we have developed cognitive dissonance. All in that slave consciousness, we also develop a psychological condition called the Stockholm Syndrome. And with that, I want to go ahead and play a good video that explains that psychological condition also. So just bear with me, brothers and sisters, so that I can bring this up and go ahead and get started. But yeah, we have to really be honest with ourselves on the conditions that we have developed because of what we have experienced as a people. It's as simple as that. And we have to be willing to talk about it, because that's the first area of defense to dealing with it. If we can't even talk about it because of the cognitive dissonance, the feeling that we feel when we talk about it, then how can we ever get it? So let's talk about the Stockholm Syndrome.
Today we're talking about Stockholm Syndrome. What is it and how does it apply in therapy? This is one of the most fascinating topics I've gotten to research thus far, so thank you to all of you who requested it. And in all honesty, I knew what Stockholm Syndrome was, but I didn't really know the applications or ramifications of it within my clinical therapy practice. And so this was so interesting. Stockholm Syndrome is named after a bank robbery that happened in 1973 in Stockholm, Sweden. There were bank employees that were kept for 6 days. They were first wrapped in dynamite and thrown into the bank vault. And the thing that happened that shocked everybody is that throughout those 6 days, Those captive people wrapped in dynamite, for some reason, became eerily attached to their captors. They felt bad for them. They even turned away police and assistance to get them out of there. They were not helpful at all, and even once released, some of them still kept in touch with their captors and wouldn't testify against them in court. And so everybody thought, what the hell is going on? Why won't they tell us anything? Why are they acting like they were caring and nice and they care about what happens to them? What gives? What they learned is that psychologically, in order to get through terrifying situations, we often attach to our captors as a way to almost survive it, thinking, well, you know, I care about them, I understand what's going on with them. See, they're keeping me alive, they're really nice. And in a way, by being nice to our captors, we're increasing the chances that we will live through it. So oddly enough, it's like our brain's way of helping us get through an abusive or scary and traumatic situation. This applies in a clinical therapy practice more along the lines of people who are in controlling or abusive relationships. For example, we find a lot of battered men or women will refuse to press charges against their spouse or loved one who abused them. Many even bail them out of jail after the police have taken them in because they've abused them. Now let's get into the fascinating part and the reason that Stockholm Syndrome takes hold. There are 4 factors that need to be in place and need to happen, so let's talk about them. The first, and the kind of the obvious one, is that we must feel threatened, either physically or psychologically. And we have to believe that the abuser/captor will actually act out on that threat. The way that we find this happens most commonly is indirectly. Maybe it's breaking things, throwing things around. They may even indirectly talk about harming someone or something that you really care about, like threatening to get rid of a prized possession or to harm an animal that you love and care for. The abuser's goal is actually to get you to just believe that the harm that they could do is possible and it may be imminent. The second condition, and this is where it starts to, you can see how it can psychologically shift for the person being abused, is that the abuser will then show some small kindness. In the instance with Stockholm, in Stockholm, Sweden, in that actual event, the captor said that, well, they fed us and they gave us water and they talked about how hard their life had been as a child. They will do some sort of thing to show you a little kindness, to kind of take care of you a little bit so that you believe they're not all bad. What this does is it gives the abused person hope that the situation could change. This could be a small token like a birthday card or remembering to bring dinner home. It could be any small thing. A lot of abused spouses will say, well, they didn't abuse me when they normally would, so even the absence of abuse with no positive thing added in can feel like a small token of kindness. And you know how I talked about that event in Stockholm, Sweden, how they shared some events about themselves? That's another part of it, and that goes into this number 2, is that they'll share some hard times they've been through or times they've been abused by a mother or father or caretaker. And so it gives them kind of, it humanizes them a little bit and makes us feel kind of bad for them. The third condition that needs to take place is being isolated from other perspectives. The way that this can play out in abusive relationships, there are a lot of examples that were given. One of which is, I don't like your friends because they talk bad about me. I don't want you hanging out with them anymore. And if we do, we get abused when we get home. And so in a way, we're slowly being conditioned against seeing our friends. There was an example in a woman who was speaking in one of the forums I was reading where her mother would call just to talk to her and tell her that she was worried about her and the kids. And so because of that, then the husband would find out and he would abuse her more for talking with the mother. So she slowly started telling her mom, please stop calling. You're just causing us trouble. You're ruining our relationship. And so since we're so isolated from any positive person in our life or any person who actually has any insight and is loving and supportive, all we can see is that abuse cycle and that abuse life. Another way this is described is walking on eggshells. We will do everything in our control to make sure that we keep the abuse at bay. That may mean seeing things in our whole life in perspective from the abuser's perspective to make sure everything is just the way they like it, because if it's not, we don't know what's going to happen and we may fear that they will hurt us. The fourth and final condition that must take place is that we actually feel that we are not able to escape. This can be in a lot of fashions, but one of the most common is actually through money. Many abusers will overextend them as a family or as a couple so that if the person who is being abused tries to leave, they actually can't afford anything and they may feel like they'll be out on the street. Another way this can happen is kind of through the emotional abuse avenue, where they will know intimate or embarrassing things about you, or even threaten to like shame you publicly. There was a woman who was speaking in one of the forums that I'd read saying that her ex-boyfriend had made her do some sexual acts that she wasn't comfortable with, and then when she threatened to leave, he said that he had videotaped it and he was going to release it on Facebook to all of her family and friends. And so that fear and that embarrassment and shame held her captive for another 2 years. This can also play out in a threat of suicide. A lot of the abusers will say to the abused that they will kill themselves if they leave, or they'll threaten homicide. They'll threaten to kill a child or an animal or a parent or someone else that we love if you leave. And so the person who's being abused feels like they really can't, because they don't want anything bad to happen to the person because they actually love and care about them or the other people in their lives. I'm sure if you've learned anything about the abuse cycle, you can kind of see how this plays into it and how it's so eerily similar. And the abuse cycle, I'm looking down my notes to make sure I get them just in order, is tension building, incident, reconciliation, and calm. And we go round and round. And so you can see how these certain conditions, as they play into it, can be so similar to the abuse cycle, and that's why people get stuck in it. If you know someone who's in an abusive or controlling relationship, the best thing that we can do is just listen and try to be supportive. Don't talk bad about the relationship. Don't get them to leave and try to force them to leave, because that can only build on the shame and embarrassment that they may already feel due to that relationship. And just being there to listen and support them is honestly at times what they need, and encouraging them to get some professional support. You could talk about how maybe you're in therapy and it's really helped you manage, some of the things you're going through, and you wondered if it might be helpful to them as well. And doing things kind of passively is honestly the best way to continue to have that relationship so they don't cut you out, and also be there to support them when they are ready and strong enough to make healthy decisions for them and their family. And like I said, there is so much more information on this topic. I find it so fascinating. I'll be doing a whole other video on cognitive dissonance and how that plays into it. But let me know. Give it a...
Yeah. Interesting. Again, these conditions are the result of our long-term, it's the result of the long-term of the slave consciousness that we have developed. That the Stockholm Syndrome is also based on, relationships. Just like cognitive dissonance was based on relationships, toxic relationships, abusive relationships. With the Stockholm Syndrome, as it was mentioned, you start identifying with your abuser. Matter of fact, start sympathizing with the very person or persons who are abusing you. I think she mentioned with a behavior, with a woman and a man, depending on who's being abused, they won't even press charges because of the Stockholm Syndrome. Well, again, let's think of it not as just the individual relationships like we did with cognitive dissonance, but let's think of it again as a collective relationship between us and the United States of America. Again, they have abused us in the same manner as the scenario of the Stockholm Syndrome. And many of us are experiencing that syndrome because of the relationship that we have with the United States of America. And I need for you guys really think about the parallelisms that I'm making between those two psychological conditions with the United States of America. We need to understand why we are behaving the way that we are behaving, because the relationship, or I must say the abusive relationship that we have with America. And see, that's a reality, brothers and sisters. And as she mentioned that sometimes the abuser will make it seem like they care and make it seem like they will do something. Well, how many times have the United States of America make it seem like they cared about us as Negroes, blacks, colors, and African Americans? How many have they given us things so that we would feel that they're finally accepting us, but all along they're still abusing us? Do you get the comparison, brothers and sisters? How many times have they taken away, or initially they took away our human rights, but they gave us their legislative civil rights to appease us, brothers and sisters? And it worked, because we accepted their appeasement of their legislative civil rights as opposed to our God-given, inalienable human rights. So it's working. Stockholm Syndrome, brothers and sisters. That's what we're experiencing. But I need you to do your own research so that you can recognize it for yourself, as I and others have recognized it. Now, this last video I'm going to play is going to bring up both those psychological conditions of cognitive dissonance and Stockholm syndrome, but they're going to add another condition called dissociative identity disorder. And that just gives you a good overall awareness of what's happening to us psychologically, brothers and sisters. Because in order for us to be able to move forward as individuals and as a collective, we must overcome all these conditions that are being caused by this slave consciousness that we have developed because of the long-term what is the word I'm trying to say? Colonization of our people. You got to understand, out of all that we have done, nothing has changed the fact that we're still colonized, that we're still a colonized people. And the only way to bring remedy to that is by reestablishing our Moroccan states. Now, again, some of y'all might be feeling uncomfortable when I say that, because some of y'all, in spite of what the United States of America has done and continues to do to us, you still want to stay in that relationship. You see where I'm coming from, brothers and sisters? That's the reality, man. This stuff is deep. This stuff is mental. This stuff is going to take, effort for you to get out of it, because it's mental and it's thoroughly ingrained in us. They did a job on us, brothers and sisters, in their educational systems, in their belief systems, in their thoughts that cause us to behave a certain way, so that when I go against what you believe the United States of America is, it creates that cognitive dissonance, and it also puts you in that Stockholm syndrome. But let's talk about this dissociative identity disorder, and what is that all about?
Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about cognitive dissonance. What is it, and how do we...
Oops, the wrong one. Let's see. Let me go back and get the right one. There we go. Apologize, brothers and sisters.
How's everybody doing? Welcome to the show. So today I'm going to argue that Black Americans have not escaped slavery. Today, 2024, Black Americans have not escaped slavery. Let's get into it. Okay, thank you guys for joining once again. So today I'm going to use two individuals to help make my case, right? And that is going to be Malcolm X, who I think most people know, right, as being one of the most treasured people in the Black American community. You know, he's an icon. And also a lesser well-known but equally important psychologist and economist, Dr. Amos Wilson. So I'm going to use Dr. Amos Wilson and Malcolm X to help construct this argument so we understand why. Why am I saying that Black Americans today in 2024 have not escaped slavery? How crazy are you? Well, let's take a look at it. So what we're going to do in order to get this question rolling is we're going to start with Dr. Amos Wilson, right? And I think here I want to say that this is what I'm going to play for you for Dr. Wilson is the best answer I've ever heard to why Black Americans have not escaped slavery. This is the absolute best answer to it, you know, why Black Americans have not escaped slavery. What does Dr. Amos Wilson say? Well, let's take a look at it. If I can just get to it. So this is Dr. Wilson, Amos Wilson, and I'll put a link to this in the description below. So let's hear what he has to say.
So we have some of our people here who think then that slavery was back then and had nothing to do. It had nothing to do with them.
So some people think slavery has nothing to do with them. You know, Black Americans say slavery has nothing to do with me. All right, let's see. Let's see if it does.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've never escaped slavery.
Never escaped it.
We still share the slave consciousness of our great-great-grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
We are of the same mind
Same
to a
mind,
great extent
to a great extent.
that they were. We have not advanced beyond these people. How can I say that?
How can you say that, Doctor?
I generally ask a series of questions.
Let's do it.
You say that slavery has nothing to do with you and slavery was back there. And I ask you the question then, what language do you speak? When did you learn that language? Was that the language African people were speaking when we were taken into slavery?
Nope, it wasn't.
In America. In other words, the language we speak at this moment is what? A slave language.
Bam. Think about that, my people. Think about that. Black America, think about this. Think about this.
All right. The language that our slave ancestors were forced to learn.
Forced to learn.
And we still speak it, and you can still hear the pidgin, the Creole, and the other kinds of stuff.
That's right.
In our language right at this moment that they had to go through. That language, with its words defined by history and by an experience, is the language we use today to guide our behavior. It's the language we use today to talk to ourselves. It's the language we use today to learn about ourselves and to learn about the world. It's the language today we use to try to understand ourselves. Is there no wonder then that we are still confused? So we have not escaped slavery because we are still using a slave language, and we speak the language of slaves. What kind of food do you eat? You say soul food? Was that the food of African people? Slave food.
Slave food.
The food that we find most satisfying, the food that we find that sticks to our ribs, the food that we call down home, a food that we learn to eat in the quarters. And yet we dare say that we have escaped slavery, that we have nothing to do with those people back there, that was back there.
Tell them.
In our whole very social life and social relationships, our very definition of ourselves as a people, our very attempt to commune with ourselves is mediated by the food of slaves. Understand what I'm trying to get at?
Yes, I do.
And how can you say that you exist in a different consciousness from another people?
Oof.
What kind of uniforms are we wearing? Huh?
Yo.
What kind of clothes are we wearing?
This is the best answer. I mean, we can just end the video right here.
Were these the clothes of African people?
No, sir. They were not. They were not.
This is what we got to look at. Yes. What is this to say then that we've escaped slavery? What kind of names do we respond to? Yes. Yes. Tamikas and all these other things we got going out here. What kind of names do we identify with? Why is it that African names sound strange to us now as a people, and yet we dare say that we have a different consciousness from our great slave grandparents? How can we say that?
How?
We are still of the same consciousness, and we are still in the same position. Because we are still servants of the white man. And our reason for being in America is to serve white folk and to generate wealth for them. And there has been no change at all in terms of our relationship to these people. The values that we pursue are slave values and the values of servants. The social relations that we create and interact with were built and developed during the periods of slavery. We have not escaped it at all. But it is time for us to change the slave consciousness.
It's time.
This consciousness of servitude that is still too much with us today.
Too much.
And ultimately, we ask the question that's closest to home for a lot of
This is the question. This is the question. I wonder what you guys think. This is the last one, guys. What is the last question that he's going to ask to really bring this thing home? That's what we need to hear.
The people. When we claim that we've escaped slavery, and the slavery was something back there which had nothing to do with us today. And then I asked you the question, what kind of God do you worship? What's the name of it?
What's the name of him?
Who taught you to praise him?
Who taught you to praise him?
Was this the God you were praying to before you were brought to these shores?
Oh, man, tell him.
Was this the religion you had before you were brought to these shores?
Tell him.
Can you name one African God?
Just one.
How can you then, who define yourself, the very essence of yourself and the very essence of your soul, and organize the very nature of your life here on earth, based on a God handed to us by our slave masters, claim that you have no slave consciousness and are not related to slavery?
Bam. I want to end it here. Let me just see what else he says.
In other words, then, ladies and gentlemen,
check this out.
We are not Africans.
We are not.
We are possessed by spirits and demons. We have let another people's spirit take possession of our bodies and take possession of our minds.
Bam. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And again, I'll put a link to this in the description in case anybody, I hope people will go, because it's a 2.5 hour lecture, back in the early 1990s. And it's so relevant for today. It's timeless, And I think, like I said, I think that is the absolute best answer to this question of, have we escaped slavery? And of course, I agree with Dr. Wilson 100%. We've not escaped slavery. Okay, so that's that. Now, you notice at the end there, he said that we've been possessed, right? We've been possessed. We've allowed another people's spirit to come into us. And as a result of that, we have a split in our personality. Now, let's bring this home a little bit more. If I can highlight this a little bit better here. So let's go to my slides. And we're going to check this out here. So this is not the one I wanted to go to. Let's just go here. Sorry, guys. Let me just make sure I'm in the right place here. This here. Okay. Sorry about that. That's a little mistake. We're going to get back to Stockholm Syndrome in a minute. So you got a little preview of it. But let's go back to this over here. Okay. So we've been possessed. Black Americans have been possessed, right? We've allowed another people to come into, to take over and take possession of our bodies and our minds, right? Another way of looking at this is something called dissociative identity disorder, okay, DID. It's recognized as a psychological condition characterized by the presence of two or more distinct personality states, okay, or identities within a single individual. These distinct identities may have their own names, ages, histories, characteristics. Dr. Wilson talked about they'll have their own language, they'll have their own food, they'll have their own uniforms, they'll have their own God. And this is what happened to Black Americans. We developed this dissociative identity disorder, which has, by the way, it's not even, forget about whether it's been treated, it hasn't even been acknowledged by Black Americans, by most of us, and let's be honest. Okay, but this is what happened. That's why we have the new names. That's why we have the new histories and characteristics, as you can see down there. Now, DID, or dissociative identity disorder, is often linked to what? Severe trauma during early childhood, usually extreme, repetitive, physical, sexual, or emotional abuse. Right there, right? Remember, this is a recognized psychological condition. And I would submit to you that this is what happened to Black Americans, to the indigenous blacks of this country, as well as those that were brought over here on slave ships, so-called slave ships, to the Americas. Okay? They went through a severe trauma, and as a result of that trauma, that repetitive physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, they developed a distinct personality separate from the original personality that they had before the trauma. And we know this, as you see at the bottom there, because we were given new names, we had to speak a new language, food, new God, everything that Dr. Amos Wilson beautifully laid out. Okay, so that's a very, very interesting perspective as far as I'm concerned. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to really build out this slave consciousness, you know, and really go into where it comes from, how it developed, and then importantly, you know, showing basically that it continues to this day because it hasn't been addressed. We are still using the same tools, the same language, the same foods, etc., praying to the same God that our slave ancestors did. Therefore, we have the same slave consciousness. But we can break down this psychological condition into different personality states, and that's what I want to do now. So let's just switch back to me over here. So what I want to do is really hone in on these different personalities within the slave consciousness, because that's how it affects us today. I want to use an analogy, okay? Now, I have there's a movie that I love. It's called Heat, right? And there's a scene here. Let me just play it. So in this scene, this is the bank robbery, right? And this is the analogy I want to use to sort of explain what happened to Black Americans, right? So this is an analogy, but I just want to show what happened here. And there's something very important that I want us to see, and then we'll relate it to Black America.
Don't move! Don't fucking move! Put your hands in the air! Put your hands in the air!
So this is towards the end, where those of you who haven't seen Heat, basically, this is a bank robbery. They're coming in to rob the bank. You don't need the whole full story, but they're coming in. It's a bank robbery. They're coming in to rob the bank. And let's take a look very quickly what they do.
In the air! Put them up! Down! Down! Get on your knees! Get on your knees! Get on your knees!
Okay, I'm sorry if the sound might be low.
Get over there! Get the fuck! Get Turn down! Around. Turn around! Put your hands behind you! Behind you! Behind you! Get out!
So this is an analogy, right? So I'm saying basically that this is what kind of happened to Black Americans, right? They were overtaken and overrun. And let's see what happens.
Get out! Get out! Get out, you stupid son of a... Go!
Okay. Now listen to Robert De Niro's character here.
Stay down. We want to hurt no one. We're here for the bank's money, not your money. Your money is insured by the federal government. You're not going to lose a dime. Think of your families. Don't risk your life. Don't try and be a hero. Right now, I want you to sit on the floor and put your hands on your head. Anybody feel sick? Anybody got heart trouble? Go ahead and lean against the wall.
Okay. Now, the point that I want to... You see what he said? So when the bank robber comes in, the bank robber has a new law. And the law is a dictatorial law, right? This is the law. So the people in the bank who are now hostages, right? which includes the staff that was in the bank and any customers that might have been there at the time of the bank robbery, right? So a new law comes into place. And this law is basically, like I said, a dictatorial, and you either comply as a hostage or you don't comply. Those are the only two categories that you can go into. You either comply or you don't comply. Okay, so let's switch here real quick so we can take a look at this. So we have here now, we can go, we talked about that. So here's the bank robbers, right? Sorry guys about, I know I'm not so great on getting everything ready, but there's a lot of different screens and stuff I have to load up. Anyway, so here we have the bank robbers. Let's go full screen so we can really see this, okay? And like I just said, we saw in the movie Heat what happened, right? And what happened there? You have two ways that you can go. You either comply or you don't comply. And remember, this is an analogy that I'm using to explain what happened to Black Americans in this country, okay? They either had to comply or not comply, okay? So those are the two orders that you have to go into, okay? Now, I'm going to, if you look on the right side, under compliant, those who do comply, I'm saying that you can split that again into two different categories. And what are the categories? Involuntary compliance and voluntary compliance, right? And I think those are self-explanatory. But before I go any further, it's important now that we bring Malcolm X into it, because Malcolm gave a very important speech, in my opinion. And it's such an important speech and it explains exactly the slave consciousness, right? So let's take a look at it real quick. Right, so here's Malcolm, and let's see what Malcolm has to say here.
To understand this, you have to go back to what young brother here referred to as the house Negro and the field Negro, back during slavery.
The house Negro and the field Negro, back during slavery. So remember what he said, to understand the issue, to understand what's going on today. Of course, he's speaking in the 1960s. To understand what's going on, we have to go back to what? The plantation, the slavery. That's the only way that we can understand what's going on today. And he says on the plantation what? There were two types of Negroes, house and field. Let's continue.
There was two kinds of slaves. There was the house Negro and the field Negro. The house Negro, they lived in the house with master. They dressed pretty good.
Yes, sir.
They ate good because they ate his food, what he left.
What he left.
They lived in the attic or the basement, but still they lived near their master. And they loved their master more than the master loved himself. They would give their life to save their master's house quicker than the master would.
They would give their life to serve the master or to protect the master quicker than even the master himself would, right? So the house Negro, and not all the house Negroes, but he's simplifying it though, that the house Negroes were obviously the ones who were in master's favor. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the house. They'll be out in the fields, right? So only the trusted ones could come in. And basically, that developed another personality configuration. Remember, we talked about dissociative identity disorder. This is how it starts. And when you start to see the differences within the Black Americans, right? So let's continue.
The house Negro, if the master said, we got a good house here, the house Negro say, yeah, we got a good house here. Whenever the master said we, he said we. That's how you can tell a house Negro.
That's how you can tell a house Negro. So this is not comedy. This is real truth. This is how it was.
If the master's house caught on fire, the house Negro would fight harder to put the blaze out than the master would.
The house Negro would fight harder to put the blaze out and even the master would. This is a personality configuration, right? It's a coping mechanism because of the trauma of slavery. Some slaves develop this personality configuration.
If the master got sick, the house Negro would say, "What's the matter, boss? We sick.
We sick.
Sick."
He identified with the master.
He identified himself with his master more than his master identified with himself. And if you came to the house Negro and said, "Let's run away, let's escape, let's separate," that house Negro would look at you and say, "Man, you crazy. What you mean separate? Where is there a better house than this?
Where is there a better house?
Where can I wear better clothes than this?
Where can I wear better
Where can
clothes?
I eat better food than this?" That was that house Negro.
Remember, Amos talked about the food, the clothing, and all that type of stuff. Okay, and the house Negro is identified. So the split in the personality that occurred within the house Negro, was at one, or in many cases they didn't even realize that there was a split in their personality. Okay, and they're at one with themselves and the captors. Right now, let's explain this a little bit more concretely. Right now, there's a movie that came out, and let's look at this. This is a scene from Django, right? And it seems a little bit dark, but hopefully you guys can see it, right? This is between the Leonardo DiCaprio character and Samuel Jackson's character. And Samuel Jackson's character is called Steven. And Steven is a house Negro, okay? He lives in the house or in the basement of the house or the attic, just like he says. And this scene shows this personality configuration. Hopefully you guys can see this.
What is the matter?
Them motherfuckers ain't here to buy no mandingos. They wants that girl.
Stephen, what the hell are you talking about?
They playing your ass for a fool, is what I'm talking about. They ain't here for no muscle-bound Jimmy. They here for that girl.
What girl? What, Hildy?
Yeah, Hildy. Her and Django. Them niggas know each other.
He just bought Eskimo Joe.
Did he give you any money?
No, not yet, but
Then
they
he ain't bought diddly. Not yet, no how. But he's just about to buy who he come here to buy when I interrupted him. Thank you, Stephen. You're welcome, Calvin.
Now, you guys have to understand that some of you may not have seen this particular film, but Samuel Jackson is playing a house Negro, the Negro that Malcolm X just described. And remember what Malcolm said. The house Negro, this particular type of personality, identified with the master. And he would do anything to help the master, to save the master, to defend the master. And this is what is happening in this scene. Because in this scene, the master, in this case, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, is unaware of the intentions of the Christopher Waltz and Jamie Foxx character, right? They have an ulterior motive, which Samuel Jackson finds out about, and now in this scene, he's telling the master, and the master had no idea. And this house Negro, who's still a slave now, is telling the master, hey, this is what's really going on. Pay attention. You need to do something about this nigger. Okay? This is the house Negro. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because this consciousness, this slave consciousness, is still with us today. And we still have this consciousness in 2024. I'm not going to name names and say who people are and everything, but I don't want to get into all that, but I do want to focus on these different personalities that exist within the Black American community, which has its origin, right, from slavery. So I found another video where this guy actually analyzes this a little bit more. So it's just about 30 seconds or so. He analyzes this character, and listen to what he says.
Let's start by briefly covering the history of house slaves. Now, there's varying accounts of the authenticity of the claim that house slaves acted in much the same way as Stephen. Stephen enjoys quite the cushy lifestyle as Calvin's number 2, and the veracity of his comfortable existence has some truth to it, as house slaves, without a doubt, enjoyed a better standard of living when compared to their field-bound brethren. But regardless, they were still slaves, and the work they had to perform in the house, while better in comparison to laboring in the fields, was still work. And along with having to perform all the menial and degrading tasks that needed to be performed in a large household, they were required to be on call 24/7 to serve the needs of their masters. As far as the relationship between the two, enmity did exist, and house slaves were often looked at by field slaves as privileged, stuck up, and traitorous.
House slaves were looked at as treacherous. You know, there was no trust between the house and the field slaves, and that's very, very important, right? Because this continues today within the Black American psyche.
Being that they were much closer to their oppressive masters. But here's the thing, the world we live in is hardly cut and dry, and it's not as if there were a universal rule that house slaves lived by. In all likelihood, some house slaves were much like Stephen, others were as hateful and resentful of their masters as any other slave.
Okay, I don't want to go any further than that, but you get the point here. This issue of house slaves and field slaves is very critical to understanding the Black American psyche today. So let's go a little concrete, and let's continue to go along and use this bank robber analogy that I started to use earlier. Okay, so let's move back here. We have these three categories that Black Americans fall into, right, as a result of what they experience, right? Non-compliant, that's pretty obvious. And I split the compliance into involuntary and voluntary. So the Samuel Jackson character, Stephen in Django Unchained, would be an example of voluntary compliance, right? So in the Heat movie, where everybody just did what the bank robber said, they were waving guns in their hair, that's involuntary compliance. You know, it's like you didn't really have a choice. You just had to follow the rule of law. Some people don't, and those are the non-compliance that you see there on the left. So, but the majority of people, the majority of the slaves were in that involuntary compliance group, right? There was just a few that did not comply in comparison, and then on the other end of the scale, there was this voluntary compliance, right? That is represented, for example, by the Samuel Jackson character. Stephen is his name, I believe, in the movie. Okay? So that's what we have here, and that's what I've broken down here. Now, the involuntary compliance, okay, can also be broken down further into 4 different categories. Okay, so let's just go back to 4 here. And you can see, and again, this is just what I came up with. So under involuntary compliance, you got cats, dogs, rats, and pigs. Okay, let me explain them real quick. So cats are like the cool cats, right? Remember, all these people, or all these different categories, they're still complying. They're all involuntary, but they're still complying. The cats are ones who they'll comply. They'll do what needs to be done, okay? But they're not dogs or rats or pigs. Dogs will comply, but only if they are fed, only if they get something in return that's worth their time. It's usually money. Then they'll comply. You know what I'm saying? And they're called dogs. Cats are not really so much doing it for the money. They're doing it because they just want to be left alone in peace, and they don't want to be disturbed. So those are the cool cats. They're more independent minded. They do things on their own and that type of thing. The dogs, on the other hand, they need something in order to remain compliant. Okay? The rats, well, that's clear what the rats are. In this case, the rats are those who will tattletale, the ones who will rat out, use that term, the ones that rat out other people, other slaves. Oh, hey, this guy's not complying, this guy's doing this, and they would go and tell. Now, they wouldn't do it voluntarily, but if they were, say, captured or they were, reprimanded in some way, they would say, hey, listen, this person was doing this person did this person did this, right? And then the pigs, obviously, I would say those are like the law enforcement arm of the Black Americans. And today, those are Black Americans who are the police officers, who are in law enforcement, the army, and the military and stuff like that. Those, I would say, are the pigs, right? Sorry for the bad language, but not the bad language, but calling people pigs and rats and dogs and cats. But I think it's a good way of understanding this situation. So I'm highlighting here the voluntary compliance, the rats and the pigs. And what I'm saying is that house Negroes are basically that group, and then on the left-hand side, you see those would be the field Negroes. And there's always more. The field Negroes are always in the majority. The house Negroes, I would say, would be in the definitely a minority, right? Now, let's go back and let's continue and listen to our brother here, Malcolm X, because he goes on to explain this really, really nicely, so we get an idea of what's going on. So let's go back here.
In those days, he was called a house nigger. And that's what we call him today, because we still got some house niggers running around here.
So the house niggers are the ones who, as you saw in my graph, the house niggers are the ones who are basically over complying, like they're going out of their way beyond compliance, right, to actually help the master do the master's bidding. And we saw that with the Samuel Jackson character in Django as an example, right? Now listen to this.
This modern house Negro loves his master. He wants to live near him. He'll pay 3 times as much as the house is worth just to live near his master. And then brag about, I'm the only Negro out here.
Listen.
I'm the only one on my job. I'm the only one in this school. You nothing but a house Negro. And if someone come to you right now and say, let's separate, you say the same thing that the house Negro said on the plantation.
That's right.
What you mean separate? From America? This good white man? Where you gonna get a better job than you get here? I mean, this is what you say. I ain't left nothing in Africa. That's what you say. Why, you left your mind in Africa.
And look, I don't want to call names, but you hear this today, and this may sound, I know a lot of Black Americans and definitely non-Black Americans are not going to like what I'm about to say, but you can hear this language in Black Americans today. The ones who say, this is the greatest country on earth. This is the greatest country. I've had friends of mine, Black Americans, who said to me that maybe it was a good thing that we got enslaved because now we're in America, and we have all these opportunities in America. Black people have said that to me. I'm telling you, and some of you all may have heard that too. This is where that comes from. This is a personality configuration. It is a coping mechanism. Okay? And remember, this is happening today in 2024. Even though Malcolm is talking here in the early 60s, this is happening today. This is happening because you hear particularly a lot of black conservatives will say that. They'll wrap themselves in the American flag and they'll say this is the greatest country on earth, and they'll even go as far to say there's no racism, or there's very little, or racism is no longer an issue or the biggest issue. And this is coming from this personality configuration. I know a lot of people are not going to like me saying that, but what I just said, but this is where it's coming from. That's why he says they'll pay 3 times as much as the house just to live next to their master, and then brag that they're the only Negro out here. They're the only black person here. Another black person comes like, what are you doing here? This happens today, ladies and gentlemen. I think he's going to talk briefly now. Okay, so we've dealt with the house Negro, but now let's look at the field Negro.
On that same plantation, there was the field Negro.
Hello. That's
the
right.
field Negro, those were the masses. There was always more Negroes in the field than there was Negroes in the house. The Negro in the field caught hell. He ate leftovers.
He ate leftovers.
In the house, they ate high up on the hog. The Negro in the field didn't get nothing but what was left of the insides of the hog. They call them chitlins nowadays.
Yes,
in those days, they call them what they were, guts. That's what you were, a gut eater. And some of you are still gut eaters.
Yo, man, this is real shit right here. Real shit.
The field Negro was beaten from morning till night. Mm-hmm. He lived in a shack, in a hut. He wore cast-off clothes. And he hated his master. I say he hated his master. He was intelligent. That house Negro loved his master. But that field Negro, remember, they were in the majority. And they hated the master. When the house caught on fire, he didn't try and put it out. That field Negro prayed for a wind, for a breeze.
That's right.
When the master got sick, the field Negro prayed that he died. If someone come to the field Negro and said, let's separate, let's run, he didn't say, where are we going? He said, any place is better than here.
Any place is better than here. God bless Malcolm, man. God bless Malcolm. Oh, my God. But, hopefully you guys are getting where I'm coming through. Let's just go back real quick to this map, or this chart. And so Malcolm talked about the field and the house Negroes, and I just broke it down a little bit more to see, and nothing is necessarily set in stone. A cat could become a rat, a dog could become a rat, a pig could become a cat. People can move in between these things. But this is I just put it this way so that we can sort of understand really the different personality configurations that Black Americans developed in order to cope with the abusive, oppressive slavery system, right? Because remember, all these are coping mechanisms, okay? They're ways of coping with the trauma, with the severe trauma, as we saw with our definition of multi-personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder, right? DID. It's really just that, multiple personalities. In this case, we have a personality that has been implanted. Remember what Dr. Amos Wilson said earlier? Remember what he said earlier? We have a spirits, we've allowed a spirit and a demon to be implanted into us, right? And we know it's there because that spirit has a new name, a new God, a new language, a new food, new clothes, new way of looking at the world. And that created a split in the African American or the Black American personality. And it's being played out today. And in that sense, we've not escaped slavery. Now, we're going to end real quickly with a very important point. Again, let's go back to Brother Malcolm. Okay? Let's go back to Brother Malcolm.
You got field Negroes in America today. I'm a field Negro. The masses are the field Negroes. When they see this man's house on fire, you don't hear these little Negroes talking about our government is in trouble. They say the government is in trouble.
Okay? That's a very important point. You know, you don't say our government because it's not. It's not. This is not our government, Black Americans, man. It's not. And we got to be honest with each other, right? Even Malcolm is telling you back then, it's not our government. We would like to think it is. We would like to think it is, but when you really look at the levels of power and you really look at the situation, it is not. Listen to what he says now.
Imagine a Negro.
Imagine.
Our government. I even heard one say, our astronauts. They won't even let him near the plant. And our astronauts. Our Navy. That's a Negro that's out of his mind. That's a Negro that's out of his mind. Just as the...
That's a Negro that's out of his mind. Right? And remember, we talked about the different personalities. So your personality, the other personality comes in. So he's right. It's a Negro that's out of his mind. How can you be saying that this is our government? And you hear it today, as I mentioned earlier, you hear it today when people say, this is the greatest country and we've never had it better and we're so lucky. And I told you some of my friends making some of the statements. And we still consider this government to be, a lot of people consider this government, you know, it's our government. It's not. That's a slave consciousness, unfortunately. Now let's listen to the last thing that Malcolm says and then we'll wrap up the video.
The slave master in that day used Tom.
Just as the slave master in that day used Tom, so-called Uncle Tom, the Stephen character in Django, you know, the house Negro, the voluntary compliant, you know, the overcompensating, the one who identifies with the master more than the master even identified with himself.
The house Negro, to keep the field Negroes in check. The same old slave master today has Negroes who are nothing but modern Uncle Toms.
Modern Uncle
20th
Tom.
century Uncle Toms.
21st
to keep you and me in check. Keep us under control.
How do they do it?
Keep us passive and peaceful and non-violent.
Here we go.
That's Tom making you non-violent. It's like when you go to the dentist and the man is going to take your tooth. You're going to fight him.
That's right.
When he starts pulling. So they squirt some stuff in your jaw called Novocaine to make you think they're not doing anything to you. So you sit there and because you got all that Novocaine in your jaw, you suffer peacefully.
Yo, man, I can listen to Malcolm for a long time. Okay, guys, let me just say one last thing. Let me just go full screen here. So let me put this away. So yeah, Black Americans have not escaped slavery. And, you know, I hope I presented an argument, you know. I've used Malcolm and Dr. Amos Wilson to show this, to explain this further. And the truth is, I want to end with this conclusion, and I want to put this seed into the minds of Black Americans. This is what I want to say. What is freedom? What is freedom? Isn't freedom where you have your own sovereignty, your own nation, where you can control your own destiny? Do Black Americans have that? No. And today, Black Americans, in my opinion, are still trying to fight for this country. Fight for, try their best to be accepted and be part of this country. But the bottom line is that Black Americans are still only 14% of the country. So how can you possibly really defend yourself, get things you need in your interest? How can you do it when you're only 14% of the population? And that's number one. The other thing that Black Americans need to understand, quite frankly, is that freedom must be your own country. It must be your own sovereignty. It can't be part of a country that the very people who oppressed you and put you into slavery, that can't be freedom. And what I never understand is why Black Americans don't advocate for their own nation, for their own sovereignty. They certainly have a claim, very, very credible claim to do that. But it's not in our lexicon. I just don't understand why Black Americans, why they don't want their own. They just want to be part of this country and prove to, I don't know, you want white people, we're on a mission to get white people to accept us and to just stop being who they are. No, that's not going to work. That's not going to work as far as I'm concerned. So I don't want to get too preachy here, but it's just not going to work. And you can see why it's not going to work. It's not going to work because we are still in a slavery system, and we are still clinging on to slave values and a slave consciousness. And that's why when Malcolm said, if you get the house Negro and you say to him, yo, let's get out of here. Let's start our own country. Let's get out of here. The house Negro turns around and says, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Where are we going to go? This place is better. This is the best place. This is the greatest country on earth. And that's the attitude, I think, that in Black America we're fighting. And as far as I'm concerned, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, thank you for watching. I don't want to get this too long. I know it's probably already an hour. I hope you guys got a lot from it. Please subscribe.
All right, brothers and sisters. Woo! I tell you, that brother is right on time. He's asking or he's inquiring the right thing. Why? Why do we still want to be with these people? Why do we still want to be a part of the United States of America? Is it because we're suffering from cognitive dissonance, stockholders syndrome, and disassociation identity disorder? You see? Because anybody in their right mind who's been abused like we've been abused will want to get the hell out of that relationship. And this is what I'm advocating, and those who I'm working with are advocating. These colonizers who started who created the United States of America by coming over here to 13 colonies. You know, that's what they created for themselves. And so we already had our government. So we are so, how can I say it? If we're so disoriented to the point that we allow another people to start governing us, and now that we have this new information, this new evidence that's going to allow us to be able to govern ourselves, and now you have people who don't want to do that. They want to stay in this abusive behavior. I got to say that they're suffering from those psychological conditions. I got to come to that conclusion. And so I want to, because we're closely approaching the end, I want to hear some comments as all these points that were made on these videos, and I'm just curious to know what you guys think about what has been said. So let me go ahead and open it up and let you guys respond.
This is Makara, Thomas.
Hey, what's going on, sis?
I almost forgot. I looked. I said, "Oh, am I late? Am I late?" So I got out. Yeah, the time gets away from me. It's amazing to me. Like I said, when you say new evidence, what always comes to my mind is you're in a court case, in a trial, and there's new evidence that has to be shared with both sides. The prosecutor and the defendant's side have to look at that new evidence. And new evidence can change the course of that case. Just like the new evidence we have is supposed to change, because just like if you knew something, you're doing something, and later on you find out something else about what you just did, and you say, wow, if I had known that, I wouldn't have done this.
Exactly.
Right. So there's a lot our people don't know. And it's unfortunate that part of the problem is they are so exasperated, so beat down. Because I know before I came across this information and I was working at 9 to 5, you get home after working 8 hours. Now, remember, there's only 24 hours in a day. You work 8 or 9 or 10 hours. You sleep supposedly for 8 hours. That don't leave many hours.
Right.
And then you got to go to the store. You got to cook. You got your family. You got this. You are exasperated. You don't have much energy. You don't have much gumption. You don't have, because you're worn out. That's what the 9 to 5 does. It wears you out. And so people don't research. They don't, even though they may have a desire, a certain amount of hunger for a change, they don't have the energy for it. But when that fire, what's going to happen is all of them people, all of our brothers and sisters, however they call themselves and identify, their situations are going to get harder and harder and harder. They're going to have more stress. They're going to have more tension because their funds are not going to buy anything. They're going to be changing the workforce as far as machinery and things like that, and they're going to feel more and more and more pressure. And that pressure is going to cause a lot of them to look for what we're talking about.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Hey, how would you like the part of them? Well, he ended up saying, our own nation, because of the abuse that the United States of America has always brought upon us and continue to bring upon us, and the fact that some of us, or too many of us, still want to be in this abusive relationship.
Well, a lot of us are in this abusive relationship because they actually believe that we were brought here from Africa. And they actually believe, I don't know, that this land was uninhabited and the Europeans found it and claimed it and then they brought us over here. They actually believe all that nonsense. They need to understand that we were always here. We were all over the planet. We are the first people of the world.
Yes.
Us. We're the very first. So we are the natural heirs of the world.
Yes.
We were born. And that they came over here on boats. You can't find no slave ships. But you don't find no slave ships, but they keep pumping out those slave movies, don't they? And keep that slave narrative going. And they keep the drug narrative going, the gangster narrative going, the shoot 'em up and kill each other narrative going. And that's one thing about the television, which is programming your subconscious to where we accept these things and it becomes normalized, just like with the gayism and all of that, the interracial relationships, which we need to stop putting a halt to. We really need to stop that, because that's another way, it's just another perspective or aspect in how they're going to eliminate us.
Yes, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
They did that in Australia. That's how they're doing it. They have many levels and many different ways to eliminate us. And they do it in a way where it's not all at once, but when you look back, you'll say, damn, where are my people at? And another thing, why they can't. Now, if you were from Africa and all of the gang banging, which is ridiculous, all that nonsense that our brothers and sisters accept and participate in, why can't they extradite you? Why can't they send you back to Africa? Because you're not from there. That's why they put you. Your home is here. This is not their home. It's their home only through treaties. But they are the foreigners. You are the naturalized. You're the national of this land.
Yes, exactly.
Morocco. It is not the United States. It is not America. So stop falling for that nonsense with all the maps and stuff they put out to tell you that this land is America. America and the United States of America is in Morocco.
Yes.
It's treaties. It's in the treaties. Look at the treaties. Look at international law and United Nations. Look at the case between France and United States. They are the foreigners. They are the foreigners. You are the nationals. All of melanated people all over the world. In England, England is not an Albion or a European nation. That is part of the Moroccan Empire, and that was also from Moors. The early Europeans were Moors from Europe. They came over here too and started colonizing, but they were melanated people all over the world. They're melanated people that are the naturalized indigenous people of the world.
Exactly. And so that's part of the mission that we have, to spread that information to our people so that our people will know the truth. And, I like the way that he put the new terms of, or the way that he puts it, that Malcolm explained it back in the 60s with the house Negroes and the field Negroes. And I see now, I look at straight up without sugarcoating it. I look at these Negroes who, I'll say the ones who know. I say they are new house niggas, because they know that they know better. So they are definitely the new house Negroes, and we who know we have to separate from America, okay, know that we have to reclaim our Moroccan states, fill those vacant seats. we are the field Negroes, you see. And so that's the new separations now. Those Negroes who still want to be American, they are the new house Negroes. And we who know that we need to fill those Moroccan seats, we need to reestablish our government, we are the new field Negroes. What do you think about that?
One thing, too, about America, so-called America, United States, they have existed and always perpetrated war, murder, death, lies, cheating, what have you. It's like a gangster. And you get into the hood game and all of that. And they always tell you in the movies, what do they say? There's only 3 ways this is going to end. What is it? You're going to be in jail, or you're going to be exiled, or you're going to die.
Right.
That's America. Because America is nothing but a big gangster, a big bully of the world. And the whole world's starting to fight back because everybody's getting tired of their nonsense.
Exactly.
And their days are numbered because you cannot consistently be the bad guy and expect to win.
Exactly. Well, I tell you, Sister McCarver, it's always a pleasure to hear you. And as always, time just flies. It's almost that time. But before I leave, I want to give anybody else has any closing remarks before I conclude for this evening. Anybody has?
This is Sade.
Hey, what's going on?
Sister pretty much, what's going on, my brother? Sister pretty much said it all. She pretty much explained all of it. At the end of the day, it's time for those of us who are still holding back and hoping and wishing to let go and put that hope and all that energy towards us, towards our own government. Our own destiny. It's too many of us who have forgiven, overcame all the atrocities that were done to us and continue to be done to us. I mean, as the brother was saying, that like we all know, we all experience that even having money don't give us power.
Right.
They show us on many occasions with individuals who have money that still are not able to do what it is with the money that they would like to do due to being in the jurisdiction of America and America having the final say of what you do and how you maneuver with your money and who you give your money to. And for us, we paying taxes. And our taxes are being sent to Ukraine. I mean,
right.
How should we feel? How should we feel about that? We should look at that, right? And we should look at that and say, come on, if we're going to pay taxes, we want our taxes to go towards people that look like us. And mind you, it's not about separation. It's not about saying that we dislike any other people, but it's about taking care of family first. If a person doesn't take care of his family, he doesn't get proper respect. So if we're not taking care of our family, then why shouldn't we get disrespected? Because we're not taking care of family first. That's all it's about. Every other people have a landmass, a government, and a nationality that they're tied to. The Koreans have Korea. They don't have Europeans governing them. Chinese have China. They don't have Europeans governing them. in them.
Exactly.
So why should we continue to accept that and make excuses for ourselves and say, oh, this is America? No, sister said it. America is in Morocco. So therefore, if it's in Morocco and you go to that 1952 France versus the United States, it says it clear as day. Clear as day. America's in Morocco. So if you know that, then it's just a matter of unlearning what you have been carrying for so many years, believing that it was true. I mean, let's look at it this way. We believed in the Easter Bunny and we believed in Santa Claus at one point, but we realized that it wasn't true. And we let it go and we moved on. We grew up. So it's time to just grow up. To grow up and realize that at the end of the day, look, we've been fed untruths. They've been, as the young people say, they've been capping on us. Yeah. You know, at the end of the day, so now it's time for us to, come do what we need to do and reestablish our own government within Morocco and deal with America on an equal basis the way it was intended to be. We're not dealing with them the way it's intended to be. We were supposed to be able to do business with them as our own sovereign nation. Go ahead.
But it wouldn't be totally equal basis. We would have equalities, but we are the indigenous people. They are the foreigners. There's an inequality in that. It's like a renter and a tenant.
We'd be the dominant party on the contract.
That's right. This is our house, and they're the foreigners coming over here. They're supposed to be paying us taxes. We're not supposed to be paying them.
Exactly.
Right.
May I be heard?
And with both of y'all, exactly. Say that again.
May I be heard?
Yes, real quickly. But you definitely can be heard. What you got, sis?
Yes, in the system of white supremacy, there will always be coons, Uncle Toms, the house Negro, and the field Negro, until we can get our own power base here. I remember Malcolm saying to, I think, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, how he wanted to start his own, have his own, because he didn't want them to be working for the white man. That's why he started his own newspaper, so they can tell their news the way it's supposed to be told. So until we can do that, and then let me just tell you this, there are people here in America, such as my mom, such as my uncles and aunts and cousins, are not going anywhere. This is where we bled for this land, slaved for this land, and a lot of them do not identify with Africa. Until we can change that mindset, then we'll get somewhere. But as long as we're here in America and they have that mindset, it's going to be status quo. Thank you.
But we're not in America. We're in Morocco. America is in Morocco. We're Moroccans.
Well,
we're not Africans. We're Moroccans.
Okay, that's a matter of I respect your opinion, sister, but a lot of people.
But it's not an opinion. You got to read the treaties. You got to read the treaties and international law.
Ma'am, one thing we can do with this radio station is we can respectfully disagree. That's all.
I'm just trying to tell you the truth.
I know, but I respectfully disagree with that. Thank you very much.
Wow.
And it's I tell you, it's a shame that we ain't got time. We absolutely are running out of time, so we can't dwell into it. But if you guys would just come back next Sunday, we can continue where we left off for sure. But I definitely appreciate everybody taking the time to spend some time with us this Sunday afternoon. And I look forward to spending some more time next week. So I I don't want to go into the other podcast. All I got to say is that I love all of y'all dearly, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. Peace.